It's good to be with you all. I'm actually thinking about hyphenating my name, you know, so I don't always have to go first. Is that because I'm first in the alphabet, or I know it's not because I'm the tallest, but I usually do have to kick these things off, but I'm glad to do it. I brought a prop today. Now it's pretty crude, but it's the best I can do. And I think it'll paint a really good picture for you folks. For those of you in the back that can't see the numbers, what this circle means, as best it is, again, it's a little bit crude, but what this circle represents is our current $10.6 billion annual budget. And this hole right here in the middle, that hole is a good thing, because that identifies new revenue. So we got this $10.6 billion budget. We got this little hole right here in the middle that's new revenue coming in, and we like new revenue, right, Judge? Absolutely. That helps. But when I turn this over, this black ring, that represents new expenditures. So as good as this little hole is, this black part is our challenge. That's how much more in expenditures we're going to be faced with relative to our new income that we have identified. So that's our challenge. This black portion represents a number of things, the biggest of which are probably our pension costs and the expansion of Medicaid. So we have great challenges. Most of you all know this. You've read the papers, you see the news accounts, and you know that in addition to the $1.2 billion that we came up with last time in our budget for pension expense, which some of that came at the expense of one-time dollars. So when you're spending one-time dollars, you're just hoping that more one-time dollars will be there the next time. They usually are. Dorsey knows that. Usually finds some new one-time dollars. But in addition to that $1.2 billion, $1.23 billion that we pumped into pensions last budget cycle, we're going to have to find about an additional billion in this budget cycle. So our challenges are very great. And you know, it's always been my custom to tell folks what they need to hear as opposed to what they actually want to hear. And I've been to a lot of forums, and most of the time the message that I give, and Suzanne can attest to this, the message I give is certainly not what they want to hear, but it is what they need to hear. This is a great challenge that we face. Without structural changes, we can't achieve the goal that we need to achieve. I've often stated that even if we went out and struck oil on the Capitol lawn today, and we're able to find $40 billion and make all of our pension systems flush, without structural changes in 20 years, we'd be right back where we are today. Part of this whole challenge is the CERS, County Employees Retirement System, and I know it's a struggle with the assumption changes that the board made. I want to make it very clear that those assumption changes that exposed our County Employees Retirement System came from the board, not from anything that we've done in pension reform. But it's the reality that we live in today. Defined benefit plans have become a real challenge for us. So we're going to have to wrestle with that. We're going to obviously have to wrestle with a lot of other issues as well, and I know my colleagues will identify many of those. I just came from a meeting that involved Certificate of Needs and also MCOs, managed care organizations, our managed care organizations. And Mary, you know this because we recently had a conversation in this regard. That's another great challenge for us, how we deal with our Medicaid population and provide them the services that we need, and at the same time get the folks that are managing this for us to act in a way that actually is more responsible than the way that they're currently conducting their business. I brought along a chart for you, just another little visual. I like visuals. They help me wade through a lot of the issues, and I just wanted to run through real quickly how our state budget, how our what will be a $23 billion budget in all likelihood this session, how it's probably going to be divided up. The biggest portion of our budget will be spent on education, as it always is, and which is our most primary responsibility in state government. But between education, K through 12, and post-secondary, we're looking at 54% of our budget to be consumed by education alone. An additional 18% will go to Medicaid. This is an increasing piece of the pie, that slice of the pie, just since I've been in it. And Dorsey, I'm sure you've seen it in far greater magnitude than I have, but I think when I first started, it consumed maybe 11 to 12%, barely over 10, and now it's up to 18% and expanding. So this is a great, great challenge. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services without Medicaid will consume 6% of our budget. Justice and Public Safety without corrections will consume 2%. The judicial branch of our state government will consume 3%, and the legislative percent will consume 1%. Other expenditures will consume 11%, and I've purposely left out corrections that will consume 4% of our budget. And I want to highlight that for just a minute. 4% of our budget go to corrections. Now, you've read, I'm sure, and you've been exposed to the fact that our prison population is increasing. Much of this is because of the drug problem that we have in the state of Kentucky. We are not unique. Kentucky is one of 50 states that's facing a severe opioid problem across the country. And there is a move afoot, and has been a move afoot, to not incarcerate as much to deal with this problem as it is to treat, rehabilitate, which is fine. And they make the argument that our prisons population is swelling and it's causing a fiscal strain on our state government. But I want to point out one thing that I went back and did a little bit of research on, that to the capacity that I was able to, just looked at some previous budgets. And in spite of our prison population swelling, as many are making the case for, because of this opioid crisis, the percent of the budget that we spend on corrections actually hasn't increased. It stayed right about at that same number of 4% down through the years. Granted, the budget has grown, so this percent, this 4%, is more money than we have spent in years past, but as a percent of the budget, it hasn't increased. I'll only bring this up for one reason. This is going to be another big issue that we address in the coming session of the General Assembly. And while we do need to treat people on this opioid crisis that we currently have, quite frankly, we've been down that road where we soften up on what some would call soft on crime and tried to go to the treatment model. But I will tell you, that's not always worked. It just simply haven't. That's tough medicine to swallow, and there's some of you that are probably pushing back on that concept, but we only have to go to our judges and our law enforcement people and understand that sometimes that approach just doesn't work. So it's a tough issue, one that we have to balance out on incarceration as opposed to rehabilitation. And that is a topic that we will be discussing, and a balance that we'll try to strike in this coming session of the General Assembly. I could go on and on and on and on with the issues that we're going to be faced with. This is just a quick highlight of some of the things that are of particular concern to me. So I know you don't want me to talk forever, and I don't want to talk forever, Jatend, so I'm going to turn the mic over to my colleagues now. Thank you all very much, and happy holidays to you.
Thank you, Senator. What a way to start with the fears, with the props. So I think it's a great way. But I'd also call on Dorsey, because he told me that he had to leave early for other meetings. So if you don't mind, I'm going to change you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I thank you, Jatan, for allowing me to be next. So I can put it on my schedule today. When is the group to be here in February? What's Saturday? Have you decided? No. No, okay. Well, just, no problem. Just let us know so we can put it. Yes, thank you. Got it. Got it. Well, you know, 'tis the season. And I don't necessarily think that it's, I think there are cheers in the air. I really don't have legislative fears. You know, I think we just have to take our issues head on. And we have to be cognizant of them and move forward with them. I don't think that with this being Wednesday and next week being the final really full week that's not encumbered with a holiday, I don't think that Governor Bevin will be calling a special legislative session. So if that was a fear, you know, I don't make that decision. He does, but it just doesn't appear that way. And with that said, that sends us straight into January the 2nd, which is the start of our regular session for 2018. And it's a full 90-day event for January, February, and March, and a few days in April. But the point is, I see only 4 items that I think we ought to put on the agenda today, and not all the other things like I've pre-filed a bill, which reminds me, you all better check your driver's license and make sure it hadn't expired. Now, you don't laugh at me. We had a little fender bender the other day, and there was the person that was driving, and I'm not going to tell you who it was because it's my wife, and her license had expired. And the reason it had expired is because the Transportation Cabinet no longer sends postcards to remind you of that every 4-year renewal. And oh, by the way, in the near future, it'll be an 8-year renewal if you so decide. So anyway, but the point I'm trying to drive at is I think all of those things need to be pushed to the side, and we deal with 4 issues. 4 issues. The first one, obviously, is the budget. I think since the governor has put that forefront, I think the budget with the pension reform are the first 2 items that need to be dealt with. The next one, obviously, is going to be the road budget plan, or the road plan budget, and I think that one has to be determined because it has its own revenue stream. And then the last thing is tax reform. Now, if we deal with those 4 issues and we have something successful in those 4 issues, we'll have a very successful session of the General Assembly. And I look forward to it. Then we can add all the other things because there's 60 days that we work in, and that'll happen. You know, one of the other things that I find so important to my Senate district is the area development districts, where we are today. And you all are aware of the fact that this area development district and the others in the Commonwealth are so important to rural Kentucky and to our rural communities. It's the real deal with regards to handling complicated issues that you all deal with grants, also with our seniors they're not complicated, but making sure that they get what's due them, right? It's very important, and I applaud you for that. And I've always been a supporter of the area development districts. Next thing I want to share with you is I know a lot of you concerned citizens and elected officials will be coming to Frankfort. I've got an open door policy. Please come see me. Let me know you're there. Let me know what you're there for. I mean, with regards to the issues you're tracking, and I want to be mindful of that because that's my responsibility. Because I am your voice in Frankfort, and I appreciate the opportunity to be the legislative voice in Frankfort for Henderson, Union, Webster, and then I got 3 other counties down in another ad district. But I appreciate it. And with that said, I want to wish each and every one of you a Merry Christmas. And it's going to be a great new year. And thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Ridley. And I think if you think about it, you know, for years, and especially for the last year or 2, we have been so fortunate to have a delegation from the Gradd region of the legislators in the Senate and the House they're always there for us. I mean, those of you who may not be at the legislative breakfast in the past, you will see that all 10, 11 of them will be around here, spend time, 2-3 hours and everything else. And that's because I think, we do believe, and they are the great servants. As you guys go through the 60 days of session, at the same time you got to also worry about your elections and all those things, and you still do the right thing. And Senator, you are exactly right. You can always tell us how great everything is going, but I think we need to hear what you say, the real thing, the real perspective, what's happening, fears and no fears. So again, thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to call on Senator C.B. Embry, and before he says, I'll tell you, it's a fear because he's the one who made a motion to hire me as the executive director of the Gradd.
I'm going to give you my opinions and predictions. Things can change very quickly in Frankfurt, and there's a lot of different opinions. So who knows how things will work out. And they don't always work out the way we think they will or want them to. A few years ago, in our session, the governor had a top legislative priority. The Speaker of the House and his leadership team had a top legislative priority. The President of the Senate and his leadership team had a top legislative priority. All three failed. They did not pass. So sometimes things don't work out. I hope we're not about to do something like that again, but it looks like that could happen. Hope not. All summer long, we had been expecting to have a special session on the pension system. We had a very good committee working extremely hard, diligently, week after week, preparing a proposal. However, and I was told twice during the summer and fall not to schedule any events the next week because we're probably going to have a special session. It didn't happen. And we're not going to have a special session. They're not going to call it for next Monday. That's our last chance. And it should not be called for next Monday. We're only 20 days away from the regular session. We need that $325,000 for the pensions and for the budget. We can theoretically do that the first week. Will we? I don't think so. But we could. The reason a special session was not called, the majority of the legislators, Republicans and Democrats, did not support it because of there's no separation in it that would have helped city and county governments. I wasn't for it. And if the votes are not there today, I don't think they will be there the first week in January. And talking to my friends in the House, I don't think that plan's going to pass anyway. Now the House has a proposed pension plan of their own, which reportedly is an improvement. I haven't seen, I've seen bullet points, but I haven't seen it in complete legislative form. I don't think it is yet. It may still be being tweaked. I don't know how it's scored. In other words, does it save money or cost money? I don't know that yet. But that plan will be in contention and probably has the best chance of passing. My colleague, State Senator Ralph Alvarado, a medical doctor from Clark County, will be proposing a shared responsibility pension plan that is being supported by the school superintendents and some educators. That could be in contention. And there will be at least 3 other or 4 pension proposals from legislators. I don't think any of those will pass, but there will be several under consideration. Watch this. If by the second week in February, if one of those plans does not pass, I don't think a pension plan will pass. I hope it does. Everybody wants it to do so. But we have to have majority agreement. The second, I think there's 3 issues. I put the budget and the road plan as one issue. It's a budget issue. The other major issue is tax reform. We certainly need more revenue. I've been in the General Assembly 15 years. We talk about tax reform every time. We've had statewide tax workforces to study the issue. We've never been able to reach agreement. If you think the pension plan is complex, controversial, and difficult, tax reform is more so. Everybody wants tax reform to pass. Everyone has a different vision of what that is. So I don't know whether we'll reach agreement or not. Personally, I doubt it, but I hope it does. And the same thing, if tax reform does not pass by the second week in February, I don't think it will. At that time, we'll have to be spending 75 or 80% of our time on the state budget. Now, there's other sources of revenue besides taxes, and you know, that could happen. For example, if you put together the tax exemptions, the tax credits, the subsidies that we give to many different sources, that is greater than the money in our budget. In other words, if we did away with all of them, our budget would more than double. That would not be any tax increases. We'd just be doing away with the exemptions and subsidies. I think we can pick up several hundred million that way, but all of them will not be done away with, and that would be drastic if we did. For example, the two biggest tax exemptions, no sales tax on groceries or prescriptions, that's the two biggest. We're not going to do away with that. I'll give you another one. The subsidies for our family farmers. The average farmer in Kentucky is about 65 years old. We need a lot of young farmers coming on. Without those exemptions, our family farmers are not competitive with other states. We would probably lose several hundred family farmers to bankruptcy if we did away with those subsidies. Many of them would be the younger farmers just trying to get hold, having a very small profit margin, trying to pay off big debt on their equipment that they've purchased. That would be very hard to handle. But there are some exemptions and subsidies we could do away with, and there's a source of income. Medical marijuana has been talked about, could be a source. There's many sources. Whether any of them would pass or not, like expanded gambling, it's been defeated at least 10 times. I don't know, I doubt if that would pass, but there's other sources besides tax revenue. If we come to the budget without tax reform, without passing the pension plan, and without finding some other source of revenue, the budget will be extremely difficult. Probably cuts across the board 15–17%. And we've had agencies that's been cut budget after budget in recent years. I don't see how we could stand that. It'd be extremely hard to vote for. So hopefully that will not happen. And that reality is one thing that may help tax reform or the pension program to pass in some way. That's because without those things, that would be very tough for our state. Now, I'll mention two other things quickly. I also strongly support regionalism and area development districts. I'm a former mayor and judge executive, former two-time chairman of Gradd. That probably enters into my thinking because I know how valuable area development districts are to city and county governments. Jatan and his staff do a tremendous job, and I appreciate their help when I was in local office, and I know they do a great job. So I strongly support regionalism. I'll just mention one initiative. Senator Gergler, a Republican from the Somerset area, and I will have a bill By the way, there will be 1,100 bills besides the 3 I told you about. That's the main things. No more than 10 or 12% of them will pass. We will have a bill that, if it becomes law, will do away with a legislative retirement system. We've tried that at least twice in the past. This will be my 3rd attempt. It's difficult to get passed. But under the current circumstances with our pension problems, I think we should be concentrating on teachers, state employees, and the judicial system, the judges. I don't think legislators should have a retirement system. I think we should take that off the board. So we will be trying to get that legislation passed in our 3rd attempt this coming session. I give great importance. It helps me make my decisions on people who contact me, constituents, who contact me on their own, of their own initiative, in their own words. I don't like form letters, because they feel strongly about some issue or some concern. I get about 200 a day emails when I'm in session. You can contact me at cb.embry@lrc.ky.gov. You can also call the toll-free message line, 1-800-372-7181. I read all my emails. I answer all my emails myself. That's why I'm in my office during session in Frankfurt at 6 o'clock every morning, 5 Winsburg time. When you call, if you ask for me to return your call, either I or my wife will do so. Sometimes when you represent 115,000 people, the phone calls can be overwhelming with everything else we do. So I do have my wife help me with that sometimes, but I personally answer all my emails myself. So I welcome you contacting me. That means a lot when I'm making my decisions how to vote. It's my pleasure to be with you. I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Senator. Again, we are proud of your dedicated service and all of them here as well. I forgot to introduce Mayor Dennis Chin from City of Hartford. Again, welcome. He's the newest mayor in the Gradd region. Now I think we have a lady who carries the load of the whole house on the other side. Is Suzanne Miles. We're going to talk about maybe the cheers as well. So, Suzanne.
Good morning. Glad to be with you all today. Well, I'll start from a different approach. You all basically have heard some of the issues that are going on, and you've heard them again and again. So I'll start off a different direction. Raise your hand if you've ever written a letter to Santa. Judge Johnston? Really? Okay. Raise your hand if you've helped someone write a letter to Santa. Okay, finally got, I think, the majority of everyone. Now raise your hand if you've got everything on your list, or the list that you helped write, that every single item on that list was delivered by Santa. Can you come help us in Frankfurt?
I'd be happy to.
Come on up. I'll save you a seat. That's basically where we're at right now. You know, we do... Obviously, we get requests from a lot of different directions. We are going into budget year. I'm probably going to be a little bit more optimistic than the Senate side. I do believe we will pass a pension bill the first week of session. That's a very strong goal on the House side. It's a lofty goal, but I do think that we will have something. We do not have anything in print, and we are where we are with the bullet points and things like that, of where the mindset is and where we think we'll have enough votes to be able to get to that point. So that's kind of where we are on the pension side. Going into the budget year, basically what I've asked you, raising your hand at the list that you wrote to Santa. We get those lists, and I will say, as you will know, most things you put on your list were very important. If you read the Dear Santa letters in the newspapers that everyone prints with the small children, what is a common thing that I've read throughout my different papers and things. Is there anyone that can tell me one item that you continue to see in those lists? Anybody?
Peace.
Peace? Anybody else? Food? Anything else? Something that I've continued to see is whenever you read those lists, a lot of times, does anyone ever name a sibling? Please bring my brother or my sister something. Please bring my friend something. You know, please bring someone else something. Well, as elected officials, we do that a lot of times, that we're trying to keep in mind the other people and not put ourselves first. And I know that sometimes it may appear not to be that way, but the mindset is that we need to make sure that we're paying attention and taking care of all the people and paying attention to all the needs and making sure that we're the best stewards of the dollars that we are provided to distribute. And so that's what comes down to whenever we start looking at the budget, we have to start looking at things that we cannot afford, you know, because basically, at the long and the short of it, you know, this is a magical time of the year, and there are wonderful things that take place. And there will be, whenever the budget comes around, there will be a lot of wonderful things that will be taken care of. But a lot of things that we are going to be focused on at this point in time are the necessities. And I think that we all see that not only at Christmas time, but throughout the next 2 years with this budget that we'll be looking at. Our roads, our bridges, our highways. I think all of you all can attest that there are needs there, and what we're going to have to do with those needs. There is a large push on the House side to look at the gas tax, look at the formulas that we're looking at to see if we are having the best solution for those formulas. I know that coal severance, especially for Union County, a little bit of Henderson, a little bit of the surrounding areas, coal severance has taken a drastic turn. And we have a lot less in coal severance than we've had in the past. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to look at those items and make sure that we're spending those coal severance dollars the best way we can. So at the end of the day, I do want all of you all to write a wish list to Santa, but also make your wish list out to us. But whenever you do that, keep in mind of all your neighbors, your friends, the surrounding counties, and the needs of our communities, and where we can most importantly spend our money, of the money that we have. The corrections, even though the numbers don't show it, they continue to come to us and repeatedly ask for more funding for corrections. It's not uncommon that we get those phone calls of, why are we spending money on prisoners? We should be spending it on children. You know, we get a lot of those phone calls of a lot of disparity of whatever's important to you. So at the end of the day, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. I do think that we are going into an opportunity. We've got a lot of opportunities going into this session, and I'm very, very hopeful that we will pass pension reform. I am hopeful on tax reform. I'm not gonna place my wagers on that one as strongly because we've got the Blue Ribbon Report. I've asked them how often do we have to dust the dust off the Blue Ribbon Report that I think was done several years ago. But there's several things out there that we have opportunities to work towards and to make everything a better place. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important, that we take good care of our neighbors, take care of our surroundings. And if we can live by the golden rule with each other in the jobs that we do, that's the best thing that we can offer at this point in time. So thank you all very much.
Let me just say how much we appreciate all of our elected officials being with us today. And I would ask if any of you have any questions that you'd like to direct to him at this time, we would welcome that. If anyone has a question they'd like to ask. It is.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I've got, not so much maybe as a question, but a couple of comments, but if they would like to address him, I would welcome that. On the correction side, and please, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I know that the privatization of prisons have come back up, and I think that we're looking at starting those back up again, or maybe increasing those. But my understanding is that the state is going to pay a higher amount to house those prisoners to those private prisons than what they are the county jails. right now. And so, as Webster County relies upon housing state prisoners, and that's what kind of keeps us in the black. I just really can't understand, as we see an increase already, is what you're talking about, that we're actually going to pay private prisons more than what you're going to pay your county jails, which all then in turn comes back to harder on our county governments to be able to operate. So I would ask that you keep that in mind as it goes forward, what you can do to help with that. Also, as everyone in here, I think, pretty much knows that when it comes to pensions, we all got our letter this week stating that our amount, as far as our county employee retirement system contribution, was raised from 19% to 28%. That's a 9% increase. For Webster County, that's about $350,000 that we're going to have to come up with next year just to meet the obligations as it currently stands. So we're already facing some pension problems and financial problems that we've already been given regardless of what goes on further. So I just ask that you also keep that in mind, that we're already having to start talking about decisions that, because we've already cut to replace it, that we don't cut. And at this point, you continue to cut services, and you can't cut services, unfortunately. You look, people's left. And we need all the people that we have now. We need more. We don't have enough. We need more. So I just ask that you would keep those two things in mind. Thank you.
Are these live? Okay. Good points. Judge, there's no question about it, and I will tell you throughout all of this, CERS has been a big part of the conversation. Make no mistake about that, how CERS is going to be treated in the reform. The increase in your liability, that additional exposure that you have now, and I'm sure you know this, that was a board decision that really wasn't any, through any action that we were proposing or taking from the reform side, but rather action that that the KRS board, the CERS board took, and when they lowered those assumptions, that exposed you to more liability. But it has been a topic of conversation, because certainly we understand the great challenge that you're going to be faced, and we have addressed it with previous rewrites to the original bill, and it will be addressed in the final version of it. So everything from separation to phase in and everything in between has been thoroughly vetted and discussed. We certainly understand the challenges that those folks that are in CERS face with this.
I might add that the thing you brought up about privatizing, that's just in discussion. A lot of issues are in discussion that never materialize. I don't know how that will play out, but that is not something that I'm aware of the General Assembly ourselves are pushing. It's just a discussion. And jails are very expensive. In Ohio County, we have a jail, I guess it's 100 years old or more, probably built for 30 or 40 prisoners. Recently, they had 102 in there, people sleeping on the floor. Their recent bid on a new jail was $18 million. The county doesn't have that, the state doesn't have that to help them. So that is a very difficult thing. On the separation, that's one of the reasons I am against the present plan, because having been a local official, that will greatly add the cost to the cities and counties, and I hope we can address that better. It wasn't in the present plan. So that's my remarks on your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and let me say, Senator Bowen, I loved your prompt because it not only applies to the General Assembly, but it applies to local governments as well. And the issue that local governments have is that we don't have as many revenue streams and revenue sources available to us to cover the cost to local government. You know where I stand on CERS and pensions. I believe that we should be separated. When you talked about the KRS board making those decisions, you're exactly right. Unfortunately, only about a third of the members of the KRS board come from local governments, from cities and counties, and are typically, those folks, our representatives, are overridden on votes that affect us. I know that this latest proposal came up for a vote not too long, I think last week, and instead of phasing in, they decided not to phase it in. And a non-phase in of those increases, while some counties and some cities will be able to absorb that, it's going to have devastating effect on our smaller cities and our smaller counties. So whenever this, and when you talked about Joe Bowen and maybe hyphenating your name, I thought it was Joe Bowen, Mr. Pension was
We'll put pension first, so I'll be further down the alphabet.
and I do want to say that I appreciate the governor's attempt to remedy the issues that we have, and I certainly appreciate your leadership in this. It's a tough decision. The good news is, folks, that there is money to correct this issue. The bad news, folks, is it's in your pocket right now. Just remember that.
Other comments, other questions? I see one over this way.
Judge,
Yes, Judge
can I
Schneider.
ask any of the panel, where do you stand on separation at this point? What is the attitude about separation at this point in Frankfurt?
I think the point right now on the separation, I don't think that there's, I think there's a lot of support for it as far as the separation, but I think that it's going to be more of a mindset of, if we're going to evaluate that, whether we give more members to CERS on the boards to balance that, whether they're weighted, whether there's going to be some of those decisions. But I think the crucial part right now, from what the letters that you all most recently got, is the mindset of how can we phase some of these things in so that it's not a drastic shock to the system of the counties. So I do think there is support, but as far as in this bill, I haven't seen whether it is specifically going to go forward as a complete separation at this point. It's not done yet, just to kind of keep in mind what we've got so far. We've got a mindset of where it's going, but as far as the end result, as you will know, it has transformed drastically from the initial 500 pages to where we are now. So.
Yes, things can change quickly, and I don't know which way things will end up. However, I'm strongly for separation. That's the main reason I was against the present plan. Of course, I'm a former city and county official, so I look at it from that viewpoint.
On the spot.
Well, there was a bill, Senate Bill 226, that provided for separation. And I happened to sponsor that bill, but there's been a lot of turn of events since then. You know, and this continues to be part of the conversation. I actually don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think it would come with more caveats than Senate Bill 226 had, if in fact it did happen. Something, and I only throw this out, and this is going to be of more interest to the folks that deal with this every day maybe than some of the general audience out there. And don't hold me to this, but part of the conversation has been that if in fact there was separation, maybe there would be a finance committee that whatever assumptions that the counties would have to be approved by perhaps a finance arm of the KRS board, something like that. These are the type of conversations that are out there. Because as we all know, at the end of the day, it's these assumptions that are driving this whole train. And so, I don't know, it's fluid. That's all I can say. This whole thing is fluid currently.
Mr. Chair, I would come back and say, Senator, thank you for being willing to have that conversation. I think that certainly as local governments, we already do a lot of those things. We have the Department for Local Governments looking over our shoulders to make sure that we are doing things that are proper. We certainly don't want to make the situation any worse as local governments. I think something that most folks don't understand, that the local government, cities and counties, are responsible for every dollar of deficit. It's not the state's issue. The state is not responsible for those dollars. That's why it's our responsibility to make those payments ourselves. And certainly we don't have, I personally would not have an issue if we were to move in that direction. But I think when we only have a third of the on board and well over 50% of the assets, we have a real hard time understanding when those boards, when our representatives make motions and they're voted down. So, but thank you for
if I may, the lonely voice, they're not the city or the county, but when you have the increase in the pension that we got to come up with the next year and everything else, and it's going to cost us a big chunk of funds, at the Gradd as well. And we don't get any tax revenues from the cities or counties. We can't have any tax revenues. So only thing is going to happen is that we can have to come to the cities and counties to make up the difference, or cut out some of the programs we do. So I think right now, based on the letter we received this week, Gradd has to come with additional $327,000. That it's really generally to go to the reserve or cut out some of the services we get. So I think the phasing would have been perfect for us to would not have the tremendous impact at one time. So I know that it's a bigger issue for the city and county than just the average.
And of course, there's the irony, Senator Bowen, again, I'm with Senator Mattingly in appreciating the attempt to tackle this issue, but the irony of the idea of relying on some sort of finance committee at the state level to make sure that cities and counties are doing right things after all the mistakes that have been made at the state level over the last decade in reviewing assumptions and diverting funds. I think that's part of the reason why I think cities and counties want a chance to go our own direction.
Right, and had it not been for Senate Bill 2, which was the pension system transparency bill, a lot of this conversation probably wouldn't even be taking place, because heretofore we had no vehicle, so to speak, to get to the information that we needed as far as the operations and the inner workings of these pension boards. And we simply had to be spoon-fed whatever information they were willing to give us. But now that curtain has been pulled back because of Senate Bill 2, which happened to sponsor that piece of legislation as well.
Good for you.
But, and I made no promises. I only threw that out because that has been part of this conversation. But you know what, folks, it gets down to one thing, and that is the promises you make. And we've made some promises that we haven't been able to keep, and that's tough. So we got to be careful of what promises we make going forward. Because if you make a promise and you can't fulfill that promise, you've lied to someone. You've simply lied to someone.
Anyone else? Well, if not, we thank you all for being with us.